Shalom, this is No Ordinary Voice of Spiritual Ventriloquism. You are listening to the dummy himself. It's reading this morning, listening to some of the early texts in Genesis. And came across the text where Yah told Adam that he wasn't supposed to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge that is in the midst of the garden. And because in the day that he ate thereof, you shall surely die. Of course, we think that that means physical death. It doesn't, because Adam lived on, obviously. So the death that that text is talking about is continuing and ongoing death, or a process of death, or being disconnected from the spiritual source that you have. Okay? And I got to thinking about that because, what today would be an example of that? Eating off the tree that is in the midst of the garden. We know that there were qualities. It had fruit that was pleasant to the eye, and the desire to make one wise. So there was wisdom coming from this tree. I don't believe it was a physical fruit. I think that's ridiculous. I think we need to get out of the nursery rhyme fairy tale crap that we've had. Well, I should say Mama Bird has puked down our throat for the last, 2,000, 3,000 years, however long the text has been in a public format. So it was delightful to the eye, pleasant to the eye. It was a tree that was greatly to be desired, and to make one wise. And something with such great qualities, or at least what we think are great qualities, was forbidden. We were told to stay away from it. It was pariah. It was a plague because of the spiritual separation, moving away from things like your first love and stuff like that. It would take you away from the place that Yah had put you in, only to find yourself beginning to slip and slip further and further away. Not because you decided to hang out in another place of the garden, like by the tree of life, for example. There was no forbiddance of that. But we were given a forbiddance to partake of this tree that had all of these, at least after what the world would consider were admirable qualities. And you should be like going through the drive-thru and getting your sack 2-3 times a day, right? So I got to thinking today, what is that today? Is this just a story in a land far, far away, in a time, in the dark, dreary past, or whatever, the dim, distant past? I got to thinking, well, what would the application of that be today? Now, we know that Scripture talks about trees in Hezekiel, and the prophet Hezekiel is talking about all of the trees of the field clapping their hands. So we're seeing an anthropomorphic application in Scripture comparing trees as men, or men as trees. So we know that this tree of knowledge, of the knowledge of good and evil, the most attention I've ever been drawn to by a tree was when a nut fell on my head, like, what was it? Sir Isaac Newton or whatever, whoever the hell that was. So anyway, I never, took a lecture series in it, but I did have a nut fall on my head out of a tree one time, and it drew my attention. That's not the case here in Genesis. So what would it be today if men are trees and trees are being compared to men? And the phrase "in the midst of the garden," somebody that's always got to be on the stage, perhaps. Somebody that's always got to be the center of attention. Somebody that the focus has always got to be on them. Somebody whose branches are blowing, always blowing and waving, getting everybody's attention. Look at me. That's probably the tree that you shouldn't be eating off of. And if anything I've said is unsettling to you, then next time I suggest you bring a life jacket. Shalom.